quite happy to do it. Thank you, General Hopper. For the record, my name is Rob Merchant. I am the Chief of Planning here at VCOEB Los Angeles. And for the next few days, I'm the Acting Executive Director of the Draft Master Plan until Matt McHenrick takes over in that role. Again, I think many of you know Matt from his role here as the Acting Medical Center Director in the months before Dr. Braverman's arrival with us. First, I'd like to, again, welcome you all to GLA. I hope you got to enjoy our new canteen for lunch, a great improvement for those of you who may have seen the old one that opened earlier this year. We're very pleased to see that come online here and enhance the experience for veterans and our staff here on campus. So I'm going to take some liberties with the chair's permission on what we're going to walk through here this afternoon. And I'm really viewing our time here on the agenda as the GLA staff, followed by the presentation from our colleagues from the principal developer team, as two parts of a whole. And I will be joined about halfway through my brief remarks here by Mr. Matt McGarren, who's sitting just over here by the windows. Matt is our acting director of our homeless program here. He came to us from PA Philadelphia, which is one of the major cities in America that end veteran homelessness. So we're very glad to have him on campus here working with us and bringing that experience to GLA. So I'm going to walk through a bit of, I'm not going to do a 2-year review. We're going to go 1 year back and look about some of the things that did happen over the course of this year, just to kind of bring us forward into 2020. There we go, okay. So I like to think of 2019 and the year preceding it as 2 years where it looked to many people like not a lot of progress was being made. It had been since 2017 that we opened Building 209 with 54 units of permanent supportive housing. And that's the last time that we opened new units of permanent supportive housing on this campus. And I don't think there's a single person on the staff here, on the board, or members of the public here in the room who really are very happy about that. But we had to do some work in the interim to prepare the regulatory ground so that we could really ramp up the activity that you're going to see coming on campus this year. So that is highlighted up in the top left with, in July of this year, the issuance of our programmatic environmental impact statement. Those of you who've been familiar with our work here have heard us talking about this for some time. This is about a 2-year body of work that analyzed all the impacts of the draft master plan to this campus and to the surrounding community. We issued our record of decision on that in the fall, which really is the thing that unlocks our ability to do everything that flows forward from that. We'll get to that in a moment. Earlier in the summer, we did make an important piece of progress. This is something that is sometimes overlooked in the scope of all our other work. For those of you familiar with our footprint on the northwest corner of our campus, we do have 2 large commercial parking lots that for about 2 years previously had just been open and free parking for the community. That's a violation of the West LA Leasing Act. We fixed that. And in late summer, Safety Park, a local professional parking management firm, began operating those 2 parking lots as a professionally managed parking operation. They started charging for parking. They are employing veterans now, and there are other terms of their lease that require them to bring veteran-centered benefits back to the campus. If you're familiar with how those parking lots looked before, and you went up there today, you would see a marked improvement. They've been paved, striped, there are revenue capture machines there, and during operating hours, there's a parking lot attendant in each lot. So a small measure, one that generated some positive reactions from the community, that we had these under management. Some of our local neighbors, business owners, were not very happy with this decision, but regardless, it was the right thing to do. Dr. Braverman, of course, you met him this morning. He came on board in October. We are absolutely thrilled to have his experience here on campus as our leader. One thing he didn't mention that if you Googled his name, you would find is he was the hospital commander at Fort Hood during the shooting there, and he brings that personal experience to this campus. He understands the importance of what we're doing here, and we're just delighted and thrilled to have him. In October of this year, the columbarium opened. Again, if you haven't seen that, you should go take a look. It is absolutely beautiful. And for the first time in about 30 or 40 years, there are burials available here in Los Angeles for veterans. These are cremated remains only. First 10,000 niches are on this phase 1. Eventually that will go up to 90,000. And they just did an absolutely beautiful job with the construction and really improved the entrance to the campus off Sepulveda Boulevard. So very pleased to have that in operation. And maybe most importantly is the last piece, which was the signing of the lease agreements for building 205 and 208 on the very northern tip of the campus. Those documents have been signed between our Office of Asset Enterprise Management in Washington and the developer, and we're currently in the financial closing process and waiting for that transaction to close. When that does happen, we're estimating construction would begin shortly thereafter, 60 to 90 days. But we'll certainly keep the board and the public apprised as we go forward. That represents roughly 110 new units of permanent supported housing, and will really anchor the northern part of the campus there with building 209. It's really kind of the first down payment since 2017. Okay, so on the horizon, some big developments, and Anthony, I'm going to pick up on something that you mentioned too about the whole construction that's projected for the south side of the campus. So when we talk about the draft master plan, a lot of people think that we're just talking about building units of housing, and that's really not the case. What we're talking about is the redevelopment of the entirety of the West LA campus, and the housing is a portion of that, but we don't talk about it in terms of housing. We talk about it in terms of building a community. Our principal developer team, who will be with you shortly, is a huge part of that, and they have done incredible work over the last year in developing that community plan. But that's just one part of it. The other big part of that is the construction that Anthony alluded to that will be taking place on the south side of the campus, which will include a new bed tower. For your reference, we're sitting roughly right here. The new bed tower will be going directly behind us. We will have a new ambulatory care center directly across the street from that will provide the outpatient operations that are currently housed in this building. When that ambulatory care clinic is completed, we are proposing to take the top 5 floors off of this building, so everything above where you're sitting, renovate this floor and the sub-basement, the basement below, for administrative functions and probably some things like physical and occupational therapy, which need big pieces of space to form kind of the northwest corner of the campus. As part of that is a new patient parking garage, which will be located roughly in this area. A new research building, a new kitchen, which is currently in a design build contract and that will start construction this year. In fact, if you looked out the back, you'd start to see some solar panel removal going on. New central utility plant, and importantly here, this is a new parking structure that will be built for us by LA Metro as mitigation for the construction of the Purple Line. So I think many of you are familiar that LA Metro's Purple Line is coming to campus. This right here is an outline of what will be the station box construction area, and over here is what we're calling the western staging area. So currently, starting this week, LA Metro is beginning site preparation work for anticipating the completion of the easement agreement. This will allow them to start doing things like prepping the ground, erecting the sound walls behind which the construction will take place. There will be no underground construction, no big tunneling and boring operations until those easement negotiations are complete That's being handled by our Office of Construction and Facilities Management in Washington, together with LA Metro. But as Dr. Braverman said this morning, he's putting himself in this facility right out front and center, and we own a big piece of making sure that while this construction process is ongoing, that the impacts to patients here are minimized. So if you come back in a week or so, a couple weeks, you'll start to see much more construction activity here along Wilshire Boulevard on the western side of the campus. I spoke to Building 205 and 208 already. Those projects are going forward under a previously done environmental assessment. Building 207 is really the first building that is being undertaken by our principal developer team. We're anticipating that the lease agreements for that building will be finished later this summer. Again, construction to begin shortly thereafter. It's an 18 to 24 month construction period. It is roughly 60 units of permanent supportive housing for senior citizens. And Dr. Danberger, to your comments earlier, you actually, I don't know if you intended to, but you used a term of art that we've used to describe what we're doing here. The acute care operations that I described on the south part of the campus are designed to support the community and housing that's being built on the north part of the campus. The intent being veterans who will be living in this community are the people most in need of the healthcare services provided here on the West LA campus. And we talk about it providing a service-enriched community environment. So you really hit on that, and I would like to continue those discussions with you further and learn more about the project you talked about in San Francisco. And I think Matt would like to talk to you about that as well. Okay, I want to briefly touch on our Bridge Home project. This is the structure that Ms. Berry referred to earlier this morning. This is a joint initiative with the City of Los Angeles as part of its Bridge Home initiative. This is construction financed by the city and county jointly, carried out by the city. These are two structures. They are sprung structures. We don't say tents, we say sprung structures that are being built on the north side of the campus. Just to orient you a bit, this is the back side of the Vet home. This is New Direction. So on this parcel right here, if you went up there today, you would see two large sprung structures. They will house 50 veterans each. They will be all men, and Ms. Mary Matt will speak to the question about how we're going to work with female veterans in need of those services. This will be transitional housing for people coming directly off the street. Currently, the city is tracking on a 4th of February, week of the 4th of February, to turn this facility over to GLA. And what that means is the structures will be complete, the HVAC, all those systems will be ready to go. The two trailers that are alongside to provide personal hygiene will be there. These are some photos of the construction ongoing. The landscaping will be done, all the paving and infrastructure will be done. We are in the final stages of awarding a contract to a service provider who will come in and provide all the case management services for the 100 veterans who will be staying there. That solicitation closed December 23rd. There was a technical evaluation board on the 26th, and it's now in our contracting office, and they're in the final pieces of due diligence. We expect that contract to be awarded perhaps even this week. The triggering language in that contract is that service provider needs to be ready and operational within 45 days. So that gives the service provider 45 days to procure, deliver, and install all the beds, lockers, the things to furnish that equipment, to get the staff on site, to have all the systems up and running so that we're ready for that first cohort of veterans to move into the facility. So that's just another, we had some aerial footage shot a couple weeks ago. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt, who's going to talk about how we are going to bring veterans into the facility and get this up and running and start bringing people in.
Thanks, Rob. Excuse me. Hi, my name is Matt McGarren. I am the Chief of the Community Engagement and Reintegration Service. That's our homeless program here. We call it SERS. I am the acting chief. Came here from Philadelphia. I was Chief of Social Work in Philadelphia. All of our homeless programs in Philadelphia are under the social work service. So as Rob was saying, we're proud of the work we've done in Philadelphia. So it was the largest city to end veterans homelessness. Ending veterans homelessness means that we came to what we call a functional zero, which was that every veteran who has chosen to be housed, we've been able to house. There's still a number of veterans in Philadelphia that are living on the streets by choice, not by lack of resources on our part, not by lack of effort on our part. And coming here to Los Angeles, it is my goal and my staff's goal to do the same here. So we're doing everything we can to do that. And one of the things that we're doing is this sprung structure, which is really exciting project. If you haven't gone up to see it, I recommend going to see it. And when it does open up, it would be great if everybody can come see it also again. The idea behind this structure is that we would house 50 veterans in each of the structures and wrap services around them. So we're going to have a services contract where the service provider, which has not yet been identified to us, will provide case management services, but we also have VA staff liaisons that will go out each day to speak with the veterans, either refer them to our VA supported housing services, which is HUD-VASH, where they get a housing voucher and move right into permanent housing, or move into one of our other transitional housing where they can learn their life skills, budgeting, get employment, whatever it is they need to move into housing on their own, which is the ultimate goal of all of our programs. So Rob asked me to describe how we're going to find these 100 veterans once we build this structure. So we have a number of different ways of doing it, and we have partnerships with community organizations, and Jim here can attest to this, that we use the county, identify homeless veterans, let us know where these homeless veterans are. We use the city for the same reasons. We have our own homeless outreach teams that go out into the community, and we call them sweeps. We do sweeps with homeless encampments, identify veterans, find out what services they need, and we provide as much as we can those services. Now, when we have this structure up, we're going to recommend and ask veterans if they'd like to come immediately to that structure, to be housed for a temporary time in this structure. We'll take them right off the street, bring them right to the shelter, and then wrap services around that way. We have a number of veterans that sometimes come into our hospital that are inpatient and have a difficult time being discharged because they have no place to be discharged to. They're homeless. We don't want to let a vulnerable veteran out into the community to be discharged back out to the street. So that's another resource we're going to be using from the hospital right to this structure. We have veterans that come in through our homeless primary care team that might need a place to stay. We have veterans that contact us, every day asking for a place to stay. There's a number of different ways we can get veterans to come in off the street to fill that 100 beds. Some of you may call me and say you have a veteran that needs a place to stay. That also happens. So we're pretty confident that we will fill these 100 beds within the first couple of weeks of when this structure is being built. And we don't have an exact date of when it opens, March-ish, early March. So the plan is to admit 20 or 30 veterans within the first day or so, and then 20 or 30 every few days after that until we get to 100. There will be veterans as we admit, veterans will be leaving, so there's going to be a turnover that we don't know the exact number of what the turnover will be, but we do expect a turnover. So we do expect to see a rotating number of veterans going in and out of the program as they come. Does anybody have any questions about that? Sir.
Batista for the record. What's the process for, in the case if you have more demand than you have capacity? And how are you evaluating veterans prior to them arriving? Is there any criteria that you are running them through from a safety perspective and that sort of thing? You talk about how you're going to keep everybody safe. Well, once they're in there.
About whether they're safe to come into the housing program. So we will do a comprehensive evaluation of their background history as much as we can to make sure that they're not on there might be some criminal activity that might put them in this unsafe situation for veterans that are being housed with them in an unsafe situation. We'll have to handle that on a case-by-case basis. And if we find somebody that is not eligible to come into this program, we have other housing resources in the community where we can refer them.
Yeah, like what would disqualify somebody from being admitted to the facility?
What kind of?
What kind of things would disqualify a veteran, and what would then be the sort of actions you would take to help that veteran, if any? Is it, no, we don't think you're safe to come into the facility, and then what, is it back out on the street for them, or is it you refer them to somewhere else? How does that work?
Right, so if they're actively engaging in criminal activity, we would address that with our BAPD or with our behavioral health unit, like if they need to be the emergency room, or they're having threatening behavior right at that time. That'll be assessed at the time. If they have some criminal history in the back, like they're on some kind of offender registry, something like that, we'll address that as it comes up. We haven't had the need to exclude veterans from that, for that criteria in this area. If they have a dishonorable discharge from the military, we wouldn't be allowed to serve them in this area, but we could refer them to community providers.
I'm not sure who had the mic first. Jim Zenner. Question is, well, one or two, what's the maximum length of stay at this facility?
Well, the maximum is 180 days. That's in our service contract. Our intention is not to keep veterans there for 180 days. This is a short-term bridge housing. It's a bridge to another housing operation. So they're either going to be here and then go to transitional housing or go into permanent housing. So our goal is to have veterans move out of there within 30 days.
And second question, this is a challenge for transitional housing right now. It seems to be really hard to get somebody in the same day. And often when working with homeless vets, you have a window of opportunity that's 24 hours or less. Is it going to be a direct referral process, and what's that process?
Yes, the service contractor is required to take veterans on a same day basis.
Is that 24 hours, or is there particular?
They have 24-hour staff there. We're not sure about, we'll have to, when they get here, when the service contract provider is identified, we'll see what their capacity is for taking veterans overnight. But right now they are required to have 24-hour staff. So I'm hoping that they'll be able to do admissions 24 hours too. I don't have that answer for you yet.
That'd be great, yeah, because right now, a challenge in the county system is veterans that are incarcerated are getting released at 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, that's just one of several ways where homeless vets are leaving an institution and would go back on the street, so the 24-hour would be really beneficial.
Yeah, with incarcerated vets, we're hoping that with our Veterans Justice Outreach Program that we would know they're being released, because it's not a surprise to get released, unless they're escaping. But the jail usually knows that they're being released, right? So it would be really great if we had a more robust relationship with our jail system, that they could let us know when somebody's going to be released, so we can even pick them up.
Yeah, I just tell you, it's a challenge for just county to county.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's something we should improve. I know there was a question about female veterans too. So this strong shelter, this particular shelter is for 50 male beds in each house, in each structure. The way the buildings are built, the way the structures are built, is that it was not possible to make like a 25, a 25, and then a 50. It either had to be 50 and 50 same sex, or well, it had to be 50 or 50 the same sex. So we don't have enough of a need to have 50 shelter beds for female veterans, as far as we can tell, from the resources that we have, from the count that we've done with female veterans. There's not enough female veterans, single female veterans living on the street that we can put into a 50-bed structure. And we do have other resources for female veterans in the community with our transitional housing programs, with our supported housing, permanent housing, that we are serving the female veterans as best we can. But for this particular structure, we are only putting male veterans in.
Christine, Stanley, and we'll have more conversation about the women veterans.
Sure.
And is there any issues with substance use coming into the shelter?
Not yet.
Like, what state do they have to be in to be admitted?
So
or is that not
this is a low demand shelter, so we're not requiring sobriety to come in. It is still not allowed that substance use happens in the structure or on the campus whatsoever. So we'll address that as it comes up. So we are not requiring even that if a veteran is caught using in the shelter, we're not requiring that they be discharged at that time. We use that as an opportunity to address the issue and hopefully connect with the services. But even as it is now, veterans are free to come and go as they please. So if they leave the campus, they indulge in substances and come back, we'll still take them.
Dr. Van
Hi, Josh Bamberger from UCSF. This is cool, man. Has anyone done a veterans-only shelter in this country?
Well, there's veteran-only transitional housing programs. We have some in Philadelphia where there are only 4 veterans. On a campus like this, I believe this is the first one. This is really groundbreaking. That's what makes it so exciting.
Great, I think it's cool. So there are standards for high-quality shelter administration: property, pets, and partners. The 3 Ps we often talk about in the fifth field. How many of those can be part of the men who get to sleep here?
So their property, so each of their cubes has a locker for them to put their personal items in. And we're having this discussion right now. We haven't actually come up with a solution yet, but for bigger items, we're thinking about developing some kind of a shed where we can store these, what do you call those big 60-gallon tub things? So if we could fit items into these big 60-gallon kind of recycling tubs, we can store them into some kind of shed, but we haven't developed that yet. But most of their personal items will be able to fit in this locker that they're going to have in each of the cubes. Pets are a problem, and that's another thing where you're still exploring whether we could provide some kind of kenneling here. It'd be really difficult to bring a pet into the shelter and have one veteran with a pet, another veteran has a pet, one has a cat, one has a dog.
One has a llama.
You can just imagine.
It gets challenged very quickly.
And what was the last?
So at this point, no pets is your plan.
At this point, no pets, but it's a work in progress.
And partners. So since it's male only, so if people can't be with their families.
These are single beds, so the beds can't be pushed together. Whether somebody is partnered with somebody in the facility, that's
up to them.
Oh, yeah.
And then medical services that are going to be available. You're going to have someone who can help to organize people's medications so they can maintain adherence to the medication.
Yeah, they do need to be self-sufficient as much as they can, but we do have a homeless PAC team that will be visiting the structure to make sure that everybody's needs are taken care of. And plus, it's in close proximity to the homeless PAC team and to the other PAC teams that all of the veterans that come in will get connected to their providers here.
Trans men. People were born women and now are men.
Yeah,
Can these stay there?
they can if they're identifying as male.
And then lastly, the shelters that work really well, as you know them, it sounds like you're really on this, so I don't have much to offer, which is, moves people really quickly to the next level. So
That's the intention, yes.
day one, starting a treatment plan that honors the veteran's choice. What is it that you want? Do you want permanent housing? Do you want job training? Or do you want to be in a transitional housing? Do you work in a drug treatment? From day one, what's the plan? And then checking in with them every day to make sure they're making progress on that.
Absolutely. So that is our mantra. Discharge planning starts on day one. So the goals are veteran-centric. They are focused, particularly in this case, on housing goals, but also their treatment goals for mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment. And all the goals are outlined in their progress. We do progress notes on those, on that discharge plan. And it's a fluid discharge plan. It may change after a veteran is in 7 days. You know, we expect this to happen. The veterans will come in because they're tired of living on the street, and after 7 days they might feel better, and now all of a sudden they just want to go back out. So we use that as opportunities to change the discharge plan, to better serve them with their needs at that time. So yes, we do that.
And I'll stop with evaluation. Do you plan on contracting with an outside agency or within the VA to find out what the outcomes are in terms of healthcare utilization, survival into transitional housing for this cohort of people who are getting this novel intervention?
We track veteran data like you wouldn't believe. We'll be tracking these veterans. They'll go into our homes system or homes database, if you're familiar with that, and then it'll track whether they go into, so the veterans go into permanent housing, whether they go back into homelessness. As long as our data collection is accurate. So we will be tracking these veterans to see if it's successful.
Yeah, Hamilton.
Follow up on that.
Hamilton Underwood, to follow up on Jim's question, what's the average stay in transitional housing?
Oh, the average stay?
Yeah, length of stay.
It's about 4 months in transitional housing. So our transitional housing is, we have different types of transitional housing, and we contract with agencies, and that length of stay for the contracting beds is usually about 6 months, so the maximum length of stay. But then we have this other program that's done through a grant through the VA, and they can stay in those programs for up to 2 years. So all those programs together, the average length of stay is somewhere between 4 and 5 months.
And your max is 180.
2 years.
For this, was it 180?
Oh, for this one?
Yeah, yeah.
Is 180 days.
Okay, thank you.
Anthony Allman for the record. I need to push back a little bit on the statement regarding that there wasn't a need for female veteran housing.
Sure.
So the initial program design was 2 tents, one for women, one for men. That's what we were briefed on quite a while ago, and I know that there's been several delays. If you talk to the city, in the other 8 bridge home programs, they cohabitate men and women. Sometimes there's a partition. I've talked to the city about that. The concern is that the city and the county put up the money for the VA to execute a program that was designed to serve men and women. Somewhere along the way, female veterans, that portion was canceled. And I've often heard from VA that there wasn't sufficient demand. So I asked LASA how many female veterans were on the buy name list, and as of October, there was 195 female veterans on the buy name list. 167 of them are VA healthcare eligible, that's self-reporting. And then if you break it down by SPA, there are 34 female homeless veterans who are VA healthcare eligible in SPA 5, which is the closest. Anecdotally, a couple weeks ago, I was along San Vicente, and I watched a homeless female veteran woman get arrested for being out in the street. And so we've asked the body, the Federal Advisory Committee has asked VA repeatedly for their data on why they keep saying that there isn't a demand, but apparently, according to LASA, the local homelessness authority, there seems to be a demand.
So I know those numbers from LASA, and those are numbers, that's not a demand. So
Sure.
we do have those numbers, and we have identified those veterans. And we asked the question whether those veterans want to come into a type of shelter, because we do have shelter beds for female veterans. Yeah. You have to give me the blurry. So, okay, so of those, we actually came up with 210 female veterans.
It varied.
Yeah. So we have, we did find out a certain number were not eligible. Some veterans already have VASH vouchers and are choosing to stay in their cars rather than going into shelter. That's about 30 veterans. Some are there was a significant portion that were ineligible for VA services, about 80 of them.
Is this data specific to LA County, or are you looking at the whole catchment area? Because that's a big difference, right? So if you're talking about veterans who are in Santa Barbara or
No, this
current.
is with the LA County.
LA County.
Yeah. 42 of those are already on their way to permanent housing with us. And we are still outreaching the other 55 veterans that we don't know where they are, so we're looking to see where they are. So, again, back to my point, the community has homeless female veteran beds, and some of them don't get filled. So when I say it's not a need, I'm not saying there's no female veterans.
Right.
I'm saying this
the
type of
difference
housing
between demand
is
and
not,
capacity.
yeah, and this
Right.
type of housing is not always conducive to the type of veteran,
Right.
so we have to think of that too. We have to think of veteran safety, and female veterans have a higher prevalence of trauma.
MSD.
And so it's concerning to have a big structure like this with a lot of male veterans cohabitating with female veterans that have had that trauma issue.
So I think tomorrow we're gonna get a briefing from LASA on their.
Yeah, and I'll be back
as
again
well as
tomorrow to talk about this.
From the VA, but I think that information was generated after our request. We made the request and we were told to hold on while they reconcile the information, which I think is, it's great that the information is being provided now, but I think VA was caught off guard a little bit. And one of the things I think we spoke a while back is that it would be great if LASA and the VA published the reports together.
Right, so LASA's now doing their gap analysis, and we're working with them to, so our gap analysis is how we determine how many veterans we have in the community and how many resources we need to cover all the, not just veterans, I mean all homeless persons. So LASA does it for everybody, we do it for veteran specific, and we are working together to make sure that that data matches.
I would love to see that report published on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's
On an annual basis.
Yeah, so I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've talked to community partners, I've talked to the local elected leaders, nobody's ever seen this VA gap analysis before. And I think it's important so that everyone can plan together.
I totally agree. Nobody, and so we will work together, yes. Anybody else?
Yeah, just one following up on that question. I encourage you to ask female veterans these two questions. Question one, do they prefer to be housed with other veterans? Which, in my experience as a primary care provider for women veterans, they often get a lot of support from other women veterans. And two, would you prefer to live in a facility that has men in addition to women only, if they're veterans? And then you can get some more data from which you make the decision. Do you want to, as Anthony mentioned, partition off an area? This sounds like it's a work in progress.
It is.
You're building it as you're flying, right?
So, yeah, and so-
but it sounds like you're really working hard to find the right answer. And these could be more data that can be shared more widely in real time.
Right.
to help.
And this is hopefully the first of more kinds of projects that we're going to do. So we will address female veterans more specifically as we move along, and as we do find out more data and what the needs are, more specifically the female veterans that we have not yet identified.
James? Just a couple of questions. So this is Jim Zenner, for the record, getting used to this still. This is only for VHA eligible veterans?
This strong structure is.
Yes, okay. And follow-up question, talking about needing partners to really effectively engage and complete the mission to end homelessness. Looking at the statement of work and with your capability with staffing currently, is there anything that you see that you're gonna need from the community, county, city, in addition to what you have right now to make sure that this is successful and integrated into that?
Yeah, and you're a big part of that. So do intend to use our county partners. Jim will speak more about his, the veteran peer project that you have, but we intend to use our county partners. We intend to use them to fill in gaps that we have in services too. So our sheriff's department can go to areas where we don't normally go. We have a relationship with the sheriff to do that. The county mental health department will identify veterans that we have not identified. We work closely with LASA, we work closely with LA City. All of these community partners we tend to enhance and to grow to complete this mission.
So there's no needs that are particularly sticking out that you're gonna need assistance with
At this moment,
at this moment? conceptualizing. I know it's not on the ground, and most of program development happens after you put people on the ground, you start housing people. But
I think for this project, not at the moment, but down the road when we, as we develop our relationships more, we'll identify more needs.
great, thanks.
Anybody else?
Any other questions?
So I have a question for you on your previous, thank you. First of all, just congratulations on the bridge home. I think, I remember when we first kind of started convening the talk about needing to do like emergency housing now while long-term build out was, I think those conversations really started in this body. And so I think that's really exciting to see, even though that wasn't a formal recommendation to the secretary, it did kind of like have some initial inertia here, so congratulations to everybody for making that happen. On the VA campus side, to rehab and redevelop the medical facility, approximately, you don't have to have everything on top of your head, but about how much money does that cost, and how did the Congress appropriate that money, and why can we not appropriate a similar amount of funding through that same process for the build out of the actual housing infrastructure?
We did thanks Ben, Rob Merchant. We did a very general swag last year on the scope of the total value of construction activity we project on this campus to include all of those things, including the Purple Line construction site. And we came up with a figure in the billions. It is significant. The acute care facilities that we're talking about here are probably a third of that. Building new hospitals and ambulatory care clinics is very expensive. The appropriations process for VA major construction projects is very complicated. I wish I had, a wire chart that made it very easy to understand, but the money comes out in chunks. It comes out for initial design and then further design, and then you finally start getting into construction. Anthony, to your question earlier about the Corps of Engineers, one of the reasons that the Corps of Engineers will be involved on this campus is for VA as a department, any construction project that is over $100 million, that is the threshold to be a major construction project, must by statute be managed by the Corps of Engineers. So with our bed tower project, we were briefed yesterday by the Office of Construction Facilities Management. They look at turning the bed tower project over to the Corps of Engineers when we get to what's called schematic design 2, which we're currently finishing up schematic design 1, which is a 35% design. They hope to do that by the end of this fiscal year. We asked the same question: how do you know that that money is forthcoming? And the answer back was that every construction project of this magnitude that VA has asked for has made it through the appropriations process. But to your other question, I think this goes to your earlier question about how can the board be helpful as it goes into the upcoming year. I think what you can see in just this thumbnail of slides here is that this is the year that we're really going to see a tremendous amount of construction activity begin on this campus to turn a lot of these underutilized and decaying buildings into permanent supportive housing. Those veterans coming into those buildings will join the 54 veterans already in Building 209, will join nearly 400 veterans who live in the CalVet home, even though that is actually not part of our campus or property. We'll join the veterans who live in New Directions, the veterans who live in our community living center, the veterans who live in our domiciliary. There are already a lot of veterans living here. What we need to start doing over the next year, and this is where we could really use your help, is learning how we begin to knit those things together into this community that we're talking about. And our colleagues a couple rows behind you will be talking about that in their presentation. that is something that we could really use your help with in the coming year. And secondly, I can't remember who the comment came from, it may have been Dr. Danberger, about voucher utilization, how we continue to utilize partnerships in the community to really get that done. One of the things that we have learned at VA and that I have learned, particularly having worked in the Secretary's office during the Phoenix crisis, was that when VA tries to go it alone, we don't succeed. And we certainly know that about our work here in this campus. And that's why all of you are so important. Those who are sitting in the rows behind you from the community are so important.
Thank you. Just to follow up, yes, I'm sure that the VA capital appropriation process is very complicated, but to boil it down, tell me if this is correct. Essentially, the VA secretary can request for funding, right? And so he has requested funding, maybe not this one, previous, capital funding for the build out and renovation of this, of the medical facility. And then the Congress decides, yes, I will appropriate that amount of money. However, the VA has not yet requested appropriations for the build out of the housing infrastructure. So therefore, the Congress has not appropriated.
Yeah, and just to clarify, for housing, we don't have any statutory authority to build housing. So that is not something that we can do currently.
You could request funding for the build out of the housing infrastructure of this campus.
Of the infrastructure, that might be the key.
Housing is infrastructure, so it's not, I mean, my question is, has the VA requested funding for housing on this campus?
Not to my knowledge, because it is not something that we have statutory authority to do. Which I hate to sound like a lawyer, the worst kind of lawyer, which is a non-practicing lawyer, but that's the answer.
Yeah, this is Steve Bergman. All I was going to mention is I have a one-page fact sheet that I can print out and give to the members of the board that talk about the statutory authorities for housing, so that might help identify or answer the question that you have.
Who's first?
You got the mic.
Josh Bamberger, housing, healthcare. Where's the line? You build a hospital, the VA has statutory authority to build a hospital. Build a nursing home, the VA has statutory responsibility and capacity to build a nursing home. Residential care facility, assisted living, I don't know. Independent housing, probably not. Who made that line? For me, housing is healthcare. If I can't write a prescription for my patients to get a home, they die. When? Period. End of story. I don't care what their hemoglobin A1C is. They're gonna die if they don't have a home. Can we in this committee make a request to the VA secretary to consider using from the VA statutory authority to build opportunities for veterans to end up off the streets as part of what is acceptable within the statutory authority? How do we know if we don't push that? And what can we ask as a committee to try to move that line just a little bit more towards a rational use of our federal dollars?
Dan, let me do Dan and then Anthony.
Dan Rosenfeld, well, I can't answer that question, but I have another one. Every time we arrive here, we see the Wadsworth Chapel. What's happening with that?
Thank you, good question. I like to think of that building as kind of a symbol for this campus. And I think many of our community members view it as a symbol of what's happening on this campus. Late last winter, December, I believe, there was a request for proposals for redevelopment and use as what we call a service lease, which is a provision under the West Edward Leasing Act for reconstruction, rehabilitation of the chapel. It's probably a better word, and then an ongoing use. That has not been awarded yet, and because that is in a procurement process, that is quite honestly all that I know. But it is, I'm with you every day.
Anthony?
Anthony Allman for the record. On the pet issue, I've read in the papers that some homeless will refuse an opportunity for housing because their pet isn't allowed to go with them. Has there been any discussion with the city of LA regarding a program for veterans to house their pets while they're getting treatment or while they're in the emergency shelter, bridge home program? And the reason why I ask this is because, VA talks a lot, you can't do it alone, you need partners. The city is proficient at operating shelters. And the city also has a revocable license here for a ball field and a dog park. There was initial plans to build a play set for I think children up on the north campus dog park. I don't think that play set was ever built. Doesn't look like it. I go there quite often with my dog. I think an ideal use of that piece of property would be for the city to construct a shelter. It's something that, again, they're proficient in. There seems to be a good reason. And, honestly, a lot of people look at that dog park as being misuse of property. And I think it's a great opportunity to turn that around and have that dog park actually serve veterans in some capacity. So I know that there have been some negotiations with the city of LA. If that idea has not been proposed, I highly recommend that VA bring that to their attention.
I think that's a fantastic idea. Thank you.
The other issue I wanted to point out with the infrastructure thing, and this is something that the master plan subcommittee is obviously very concerned about. We've brought it up a couple times. I know that you don't work for OAEM and that you shouldn't speak on their behalf, but I believe the principal developer has been having discussions with the Office of Asset Enterprise Management regarding their infrastructure needs. So I look forward to that, talking to the principal developer about that.
Sure, and they may address that with you. And to your point, no, I don't work for OAEM, but I am a VA employee. I'm also a veteran, and so I care about the answer. So let me just briefly touch on that because I do think it's important.
Could you say what OAEM is?
Oh, yes, apologies. It's one of the worst acronyms in VA. Office of Asset Enterprise Management. There's no way you can say that it sounds natural. OAEM, that is the office based out of Washington that manages the enhanced use leases for all of VA, not just PLA. Infrastructure, thank you. So the infrastructure on this campus, like many VA campuses, is aging. When the South Campus redevelopment was initially considered, the infrastructure was thought of as what do we need to support the acute care operations on the South Campus. We now know that we are going to be housing at least 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing on the North Campus. We now need to align those two demands for utility infrastructure. So we currently have a study ongoing that is measuring that projected demand with current supply to determine what that delta is. We expect to have that report later this spring, very early summer. Once we know what that delta is, we can start seeing how much that's going to cost and where and how that can be financed. So that's really the big question on the infrastructure, is knitting those two pieces together.
Okay, I don't see any more name tags standing up. A couple of things.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I cut you off, Ron?
No, I was just going to say I do want to be mindful of the time and the presentations of people who have come here. Would it be possible to come back tomorrow and talk about the recommendations quickly?
We can do it now.
Okay.
If you like.
Sure.
This prevents it from having to come back tomorrow.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Okay. So these are the recommendations that we were tracking. And if these are not the right ones, please correct me and we'll get the right ones. But this just follows on with General Hopper's presentation earlier. The first one, implement a dual track land use review process prior to executing new short-term permits. I believe this was one of our concurrent principle, which I leaned over this morning and said to Mr. Mangano, if you look that up in the Washington English Dictionary, you probably have an idea about what that means. And that means that we agree that that would be good, but there are certain things that prevent us from doing that and determining what is an inherently governmental function. To that end, I think going to recommendation number 3, what we're really looking for here and what the board is looking for is a process that is more fair, transparent, open, traceable, so that people have an idea when they make a request to use the land, where that request goes. Just land in a box somewhere. Anthony, I've heard you speak about that previously. If you went to our draft master plan page now, you would see, which is westladraftmasterplan.org, you would see a link to a new land use request process that is electronic and managed on a ServiceNow platform, so that members of the public can do those things directly. And we are hoping that that is adding to a more transparent process, that people can have an idea of what is happening and why. We also continue to post important documents to our FOIA reading room, and we will do that with the Metro documents as they become available from central office to us. That link is also on the westladraftmasterplan.org website. Change management, that is a really important part of every healthcare center's operations. Like other healthcare centers, we have a process improvement team here, reports directly to the front office. It used to be called strategic redesign, which sounds awfully complicated, so we started calling it what it is, process improvement. That is a team that's led by a senior lean professional, and we intend to wrap that process into our work here. Also, as we start to build out our operations in the planning office that is being put together underneath me, we are having functions that include performance measurement, schedules, budgets, analysis, how are we doing? Is the money going in the right place? Are our efforts in the right place? Are we really making the right decisions about who do we serve, where, and with what throughout our healthcare system? Yes, recommendation 4, I just want to double check, was also a concur in principle. And lastly, and this goes to some of the questions that Ben just had, is on how do we put all this together? And this is where we really do need the help of all our community partners. As Dr. Braverman was talking this morning, if we look at how do we bring more housing, like more modular structures, similar to what we have in the bridge housing, what are the authorities that we have to do that? Probably the best authority we have to do that is with easements. So for example, if we wanted to bring more modular facilities to the campus to provide the kind of shelter that we were talking about with Matt, similar to the bridge home, one of the easiest ways to do that, since we cannot procure the housing directly ourselves, would be to grant an easement to, say, for example, the city or the county, who could then bring those facilities to our campus. And we could engage in similar arrangements, such as providing the services and wraparound case management. So yes, we continue to work on all of those. We are part of a group of people throughout Los Angeles County who meets downtown and City Hall on a quarterly basis to really run through all these issues. Voucher utilization, I think, will be a big one going forward as well.
Any more questions? Okay, I apologize for trying to cut you off there, Rob.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm here for the next 2 days. This is always
Okay.
on the schedule.
Well, we appreciate it. Thanks
No,
for the
very happy.
information. Yeah. And Dr. Reardon, thank you. We'll look forward to that fact sheet. That'll be helpful for us.
I'll have it by the end of the day.
Okay, next up,